Just a few weeks ago, I attempted to ditch my Mac by switching to the newest iPad with the latest software and the Bridge Pro keyboard. I came into it trying to find an answer to the question so many of you ask: can I finally just have one device? Or the other common question, should I buy a MacBook Air or an iPad? The experience was better than expected, but after about a week, the answer was no, and it depends. But now that I got my hands on Apple's new Magic Keyboard, which I still think is really ridiculously priced, the answer now is yes, and I no longer feel like I need my basic compact MacBook, and I think most of you don't either. Now there are still a few downsides which I'll cover in just a bit, but first let me explain why I'm way happier this time around, and as much as I hate to say it, I think Apple's crazy price keyboard is worth it. First off, one thing that I really liked about using the iPad Pro as a laptop replacement was the touchscreen. I never thought that I would want a touchscreen on a MacBook, but now I do, because sometimes it is just quicker or better than using a trackpad. And with Apple's new Magic Keyboard, it's even better. I honestly wasn't expecting the floating design to matter that much, but it surprised me. The iPad is closer to you, which makes the 11-inch screen size seem bigger, and it makes using the navigation bar much more comfortable. One thing I kept trying to do a few weeks ago was reach down for a trackpad, but this time around it is actually there, and can I just say that it is shockingly good. I've used a ton of trackpads over the years, and even though it's not a Force Touch trackpad, it is one of the best that I've used. I don't know what they did, but it is not a diving board design like most Windows laptops, so you have an even feel wherever you click. Now it is small, so that took a bit to get used to, but it is super accurate for clicking, tapping, and all of the gestures that Apple supports, which seems like pretty much everything I do on my MacBook. If you have an older MacBook that uses a diving board trackpad, this one is actually better. Now, another thing that surprised me is how I naturally just started using both the trackpad and the touchscreen and interchanging between them depending on what is faster and feels more natural. Yes, I do have to admit that you Windows guys were right. Touchscreens are definitely worth it for laptops. Now, probably my biggest issue with using the iPad before was the keyboard. None of them are really that great, and I didn't expect the Magic Keyboard to be great either, but I was wrong. The keys feel fantastic. I was skeptical that they were going to use the same switches as in the new MacBooks, but it does seem like they are. The backlighting looks great, and unlike the Bridge keyboard, my fingers don't feel cramped and don't hurt after a 2-hour typing session. They feel very stable with the perfect amount of feedback, and having that extra port for charging is great. As I was writing this review, I went back and forth between my Mac Pro's keyboard, and this iPad case actually feels better due to the extra feedback. Now, I know that I'm sounding like a major fanboy, and trust me, I do have some complaints, and I'm still not happy about how much Apple is charging, but I am just so surprised about how well it works. As we were waiting for the keyboard to come in, I watched MKBHD's review, and some of his complaints really worried me. And even though I'm a major laptop fan like he is, I have to say that I don't agree with some of his points. I was worried about the angle of adjustability being limited, but I never actually felt like I wanted it to tilt more, even when it was on my lap. Speaking of that, he mentioned that it's off balance since the iPad is floating, and that is true. It's not as good as a MacBook, but I used it on my lap for over an hour and a half, and it works surprisingly well, way better than any other keyboard case that we've tested. I was also worried about the weight and the thickness as he mentioned, but as I took it around with me on the go, I didn't find that it was really that bad. It was fairly similar to other options and more comfortable than lugging around the new MacBook Air, at least with the 11-inch version. Now here's a couple complaints that still aren't great. If you're somebody that does a lot of typing like I do, when you're trying to erase a sentence, it still takes forever as the cursor doesn't speed up. But with that said, since we now have a trackpad, in some apps you can quickly select text and just delete it like you can on a Mac, which was one of my biggest complaints moving to an iPad. Now I said some apps because Google Docs, which I use the most, doesn't support it just yet, but hopefully they will update it soon. Another issue is that some apps don't support split view, as MKBHD mentioned. Using Zoom and trying to take notes doesn't work that well because it doesn't allow you to use that, but thankfully you could still have an app open in the slide over menu, so you can take notes, but the size of it is smaller. So there are still downsides to using an iPad as a MacBook replacement, but with the new great keyboard, there are now way more upsides to getting an iPad instead of a MacBook Air, and my biggest reason for sticking with the Air is now gone. Because of that, I am no longer going to be taking around my Mac unless I need Final Cut Pro. The iPad is just way more capable overall and more flexible, and for all of you trying to decide between buying a new MacBook Air or an iPad Pro, go for the iPad, as long as you're going to be buying this really stupidly over expensive case. I think you're going to be very happy with it, as long as you can forget how much you paid. Now, I don't want to repeat my talks on apps, gaming, CPU and graphics performance, battery life, fan noise, speakers, display quality, and much more, since all of those things I covered in my last video, they're still super valid. So if you haven't seen it yet, click right over there. If you want to see more honest tech videos, click that circle above to subscribe and make sure you guys enable those notifications. If you guys have any comments or questions, let me know down below. This has been Max, and I'll catch you in the next video.